In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how you can put text and graphics onto a perspective grid. All right, so this works a little differently, but not much. It's actually, once you've done it a couple times, it becomes old hat. So we'll say that we have our grid set up already, and this is the standard grid that it comes with. But as I show you in another tutorial, you can adjust this grid to however you want, but we'll just use the standard. So if I use the move tool like normal, it's not going to put it in perspective, and adjusting these doesn't put it into perspective. So if I go over, again, I'm in Essentials Classic so that I have my tool in my toolbox. Right under the perspective grid tool, you have the perspective selection tool, and any editing, scaling, position, color, I'll show you strokes, all that kind of stuff. All has to be done with the perspective selection tool, not the move tool or anything else that you're accustomed to. And that's the difference, is that we're used to using multiple tools to change text and graphics and stuff like that. But when we're dealing with the perspective tool, you have to have the perspective selection tool to make excuse me, any changes that you want to make. So we'll select the perspective selection tool, and then right up here in the top left corner you'll see an icon that is left grab, and its hotkey is 1, right grab, which hotkey is 3, or it's the grid. So this is the right grid, the left grid, and the horizontal plane, because you don't have to always have to put them on the sides. You can put them on the floor so they look like they're laying on the floor, and its hotkey command is just hitting the number 2. So with the perspective selection tool, I'm going to click on my left grid and then just drag it on there, and there it is, right there on the perspective grid. We're going to put it up here. As I was just explaining, if you want to scale this bigger, or if you want to move it or something like that, you're not going to use your normal tool. So for example, if I use the move tool and try to move this, see how it doesn't stay in perspective? Same thing with the scale tool, or I tried to scale it bigger, it stays in, it doesn't stay in perspective. So yeah, and we'll try and change it to a color. So I say I want to make it red. See how it doesn't turn red, or any color that I select on? Again, it has to be the you have to have the perspective selection tool clicked on in order to do any edits. So for example, scale it. And as you can see, I can scale it as big as I want. It's to kind of show you. You don't have to stop at the edge here. You're using the whole perspective. So I can keep going bigger with this guy if I want, and really put him in perspective. And so I just keep dragging, stop right here at the bottom. It's a really extreme perspective, but you know, don't feel that you have to stop at the scale of the wall. It's an option, but it doesn't necessarily have to be that way. And I'm going to click on my right grid with, again, my perspective tool. So if you find that you can't click anything or edit anything, 9 out of 10 times it's because you just don't have the tool activated. I usually tear it off so that I can jump back and forth. And so I have my right grid selected, so I'm going to drag him to the top here. And I'm going to scale him down so he's as big as other tool. And there we go. And we'll say, for example, I want to change these colors or something like that. You'll notice that right up here at the top, I can edit the perspective, I can edit the text. And this is editable text right now, meaning I could change this if I wanted this to say type. I could change it. So I would just click on the tool itself, and this gets me into what they call edit mode. And so right now I'm on text, and you can see I got my little cursor that I can click it and change the word to whatever I want it to be. And then I can exit the perspective mode by just right clicking, and I can exit isolation mode, and then it's changed it to type. So You can, with your perspective tool selected, you can right click and you can go into the mode right here. So I'll double click on it, and that puts me on edit mode, and I could change that. We'll say I want to change the color of it. I'll change it to dark gray, and then I'm going to right click and I'm going to exit isolation mode, and then it becomes a bright gray. And then I can, you know, again, if I click here, which is my selection tool, it's not going to do anything. But if I want to exit the, or rather edit the text, I got to enter into isolation mode. So I'm going to isolate that selected group, and we'll change it to a lighter gray. And then I'm going to exit isolation mode, and now my, again, Command-Shift-I will hide my grid for me, and I can move them closer if I want to, like touch or something like that. However I want to do it. So let's show you something with the horizontal grid. So let's back out a little bit so we can see. And I'm going to put right. I'll copy and paste it in left, because there's a little trick when you're dealing with the perspective grid, again, not just in tools. Let's get our grid back going. Command-Shift-I. And so I want to put it on the horizontal planes right now. So again, select my grid selection tool. I'm going to click underneath so I can get on the horizontal. I'm going to put the right. You can see how it goes to here. And we'll make it big too. Stop it at the edge of that T. It's going to be kind of an extreme perspective. And I'm going to go into isolation mode. So I'll right click and isolation select that group, and we'll make it a little darker gray. I'm going to right click and I'm going to exit isolation mode. And I want to make it the same gray as this one, so it's 30% gray. So I'm going to select him again. And again, if I go to click on here, 30% gray, it's not going to do it. So right click, isolate selected group. And there's my 30% gray, so we'll make it the same gray. Right click, exit isolation mode. And so now it's the same. All right, so with my grid tool, select perspective selection tool again. If I go to drag him on here, he's going to go to the same perspective as this. And if I want him to face the other way, believe it or not, we'll hit Command Z here. I got to rotate him first. So I'm going to click on my rotation tool, and I'm going to just, click on him. And I'm going to hold my shift key, and I'm just going to rotate him 90 degrees. So now when I click on my isolation mode for perspective and I drag him down here, you'll see there he is. He's correct perspective. Click and drag him. Get that T and an E, and so it's going to be this extreme. And that is 60%. So I'm going to select him. Isolate the selection mode, select 60%, right click, exit isolation mode. Whoops, accidentally selected font. But that's cool because I can show you that as well. Because right now it's editable text. So we'll exit isolation mode here for a second. And there you go. So if you want him on the left side of the grid, or rather it doesn't go in that perspective, you got to rotate him 90 degrees first. And if you want it to look like it mirrors, then you would rotate it a negative 90 degrees, and then it'll line up. So if I wanted to mirror this to make it look like type is casting a shadow, that's how I would do that. So this is all still, as you can see, it's editable in terms of like I changed this. It said text at first, and I changed it to type. You could change the font too. So if I click on my selection tool, perspective selection tool, I can isolate the selected group, and I can edit the text on this and change the font if I want. So we'll exit my isolation group real quickly here. I could change the perspective on it and stuff like that. And we'll exit for a second real quick. Whoops, exit isolation mode. And we'll enter isolation mode. Again, select my perspective tool here. And I'm going to isolate the selected group. And you can change the text on here just like you did the font. So, I'm going to want to make sure that I, make sure that I'm isolating, or rather, it looks like it's not selecting the correct group. So I can outline the text if I want. Exit. And I got my left grid selected, so we'll change, see if we can change this guy. So I'm going to isolate the selected group, and there we go. That's what we're looking for. And that once I'm in here, my isolation mode, I think what was happening was that we didn't have I was clicking on here, but I didn't have it selected up here in my cube. I can change the font. So let's just change it to something noticeable that you can see. So we'll change it to Arnold Bachlin. And there we go. And I'm going to right click and exit out the isolation mode. And there it is. And then if I want to, move it a little bit, I click on my perspective selection tool and move him back. And there he is. And so I'm going to delete him. And I want to show you how you do that kind of mirror trick. So I'm going to click and change it to type. Scale it big. We're going to change this to my font here. So instead of Arnold Bachlin, I'll put it to Arial Black. That is a 60% gray. So I'm going to make him 60% gray. I could do it while I was in perspective grid, but I'm just going to do it here. And I'm going to rotate him, but instead of rotating him 90 degrees, I'm going to rotate him the other way. Click on my perspective selection tool. Click underneath, so I'm doing the horizontal grid. I'm dragging him down. And then you can do these kind of mirrored effects. So that is how you edit text. And let's see if we can do a graphic really quick too. So I'm just going to, exit out. And just create a graphic. Whoops. And let's hide my grid. And I can just draw. I think it's, if I'm selected on here, it'll draw the grid or draw it however I want. And I click here and I can move him down to the perspective that I want him in. Oops, exit out for a second and delete him out. And let's exit out the grid. Shift I. There we go. And so I've got a grid. So again, I'm going to go back to my grid. Whoops. Command Shift I. And we'll put him on the horizontal plane here. So just dragging him down, and there you go. And that's how you put. Works just like you do the text. You can put shapes as well. And then when you want to exit out, again, Command Shift I to hide the grid, and then it becomes just anything else. And if I want to change its color, then I would, click on my selection tool and change it to whatever color I want it to be. But that's how you edit text and edit graphics using the perspective grid and the perspective selection tool.